Imagine an era of chaos and disorder, where there is no king, and each person does what they think is right in their own eyes. This is the grim reality of the period of the judges in the Old Testament. Among the many stories in the Bible, this one stands out for its disturbing depth and the intense lessons it offers us. Before we dive into this narrative, I must issue an important warning. This content is not suitable for minors and may trigger trauma from your past. The story is found in chapters 19 to 21 of the book of Judges. Many people are familiar with chapter 19, but do not delve into the rest of the story. And there are important lessons that you and I need to learn from such a shocking story. The story begins in Judges 19 verse 1. In those days, there was no king in Israel, and this opening prepares us for a narrative where the absence of leadership and moral decay dominate. A Levite who lived in a remote area in the mountains of Ephraim decides to take a concubine from Bethlehem in the region of Judah. This Levite, a man of God, should be an example of morality and spiritual leadership, but his life soon becomes dramatically complicated. In the Bible, a concubine was a woman acquired by a man as a secondary wife. Even if both wanted to, the married could not divorce. The Levite's concubine is unfaithful to him, a betrayal that leads her to abandon her husband and return to her father's house in Bethlehem. There, she remains for 4 months. Determined to reconcile with his concubine, the Levite decides to travel to Bethlehem to bring her back. The journey is long and tiring, crossing the mountains of Ephraim to the southern city. Upon arrival, the concubine's father demonstrates exaggerated hospitality, insisting that the Levite stay for several nights, feeding him and offering drink, until finally, the Levite decides it is time to leave and says, "With all due respect, I appreciate your hospitality, but I must go. I need to return home." Finally, the Levite, his servant, and his concubine head north, and it is there that the whole tragedy occurs. At nightfall, they approach the city of Gibeah, in the land of the tribe of Benjamin. Gibeah, being an Israelite city, seemed a safe and suitable place to spend the night, unlike the foreign cities they had decided to avoid. However, they find a cold reception, and no one offers to shelter them. Eventually, an old man sees their situation and invites them to stay in his house, providing them with food and a safe place to spend the night. But this hospitality quickly turns into horror. During the night, while they were sleeping, men of the city surround the house, knock violently on the door, and say to the old man, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." This reveals the deep moral depravity of the inhabitants of Gibeah. The old man tries to protect his guest by offering his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine to the mob. The perverse men refuse the old man's daughter, but accept the Levite's concubine. Verse 25 says, "But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night until dawn. At daybreak, they let her go." Indeed, my brothers, something absurd and brutal. At dawn, the concubine returns to the old man's house, where she collapses and dies on the doorstep. The Levite's reaction to his concubine's death is both shocking and disturbing. He places her body on his donkey and returns home. Once there, he commits a grotesque act. He dismembers the concubine's body into 12 parts and sends them to each of the 11 tribes of Israel. This extreme and macabre act serves as a wake-up call, a summons for all Israel to see the gravity of the moral corruption that has taken hold of the nation and to take action against the tribe of Benjamin. The dismemberment of the concubine is a catalyst for the great subsequent events that we will delve into. But first, some important lessons we must learn. Chapter 19 of the book of Judges is a dark testimony to the dangers that arise when a society lacks responsibility and moral leadership. The initial phrase, "In those days, there was no king in Israel," underscores the absence of a central authority to enforce law and order. This lack of leadership resulted in an environment where everyone did what was right in their own eyes, creating fertile ground for anarchy and depravity. A crucial lesson from chapter 19 is the need to recognize and treat all human beings as bearers of the image of God. The Levite and the old man of Gibeah fail miserably in this aspect. The old man's willingness to offer his own daughter and the Levite's concubine to the wicked mob demonstrates a grotesque devaluation of human life, seeing these women as mere sacrificial objects. Imagine if it were someone you love dearly. The gradual departure from God is another central lesson of this chapter 19. It represents the nadir of this decay, showing how far Israel had strayed from divine ways. When a society or an individual departs from God, they lose the moral compass that guides actions and decisions. When you look at the book of Judges as a whole, what you will see is a nation of people who have slowly drifted away from God. In the case of the Israelites, this alienation resulted in behavior so degenerate that it culminated in the brutality against the concubine and the subsequent civil war. So, my friend, be mindful of the paths you choose. Continuing the story, there are more impactful points in chapters 20 and 21. After the Levite sends the dismembered parts of his concubine to the 11 tribes of Israel, the reaction is immediate and unanimous. Something needed to be done to punish the guilty. The tribes of Israel gathered, horrified by the atrocious crime committed, and decided to take drastic measures against the tribe of Benjamin, which harbored the perpetrators and refused to surrender them. This refusal led to a deadlock that quickly turned into civil war, resulting in one of the bloodiest and most devastating civil wars in Israel's history. The tribes of Israel, united against Benjamin, initially underestimated the strength and determination of the Benjamites. Despite being numerically superior, the Israelites suffered heavy losses in the first two battles. However, the tide began to turn when the Israelites sought divine guidance and adopted a more careful strategy, setting an ambush. After the final battle, only 600 Benjamite men managed to escape with their lives. The other tribes, still furious and vengeful, destroyed the Benjamite cities, killing women and children, burning villages, and nearly annihilating the tribe of Benjamin entirely. Then, in chapter 21, the other 11 tribes began to feel sorry for the tribe of Benjamin because they were essentially worried that this tribe of Benjamin would become extinct, as there were only 600 men left alive, but no Benjamite women for them to marry and reproduce. Now, they had another problem because they were concerned that one of their 12 tribes of Israel would become extinct. So, what happens is that the Israelites go and kill men of a clan called Jabesh-Gilead and kidnap 400 women who had never been with a man. They take these 400 women and give them to 400 of the 600 Benjamite men, so that these men can reproduce. However, 200 men are still missing. And the Israelites could not give their daughters to marry the Benjamites due to an oath. So they had the idea of telling these 200 men to kidnap these Israelite women. So, they have a feast, and these 200 Benjamite men go and kidnap these women while they are dancing and take them back as their wives. Personally, I know this is a crazy story and tried to summarize it as quickly as possible, but the point is this: one bad decision often leads to another, and all kinds of bad decisions affect other people. God was good and merciful in allowing this tribe to be rebuilt. However, there were still great impacts and many innocent lives lost in the midst of this story. I want to emphasize understanding that every decision you and I make has consequences. Until the next video, God bless you and protect you from all evil.